my latest. Let's try to get the right notes out. And I bless you all to get the right notes out in your lives, in whatever way that means. God bless you to get the right notes out. You might have to go over and over and over again, but don't give up. So we're gonna make a little coffee now. Make a little cappuccino in my macchinetta. And while I'm making the cappuccino, let's the bright Jerusalem light. Very intense light, especially in the summer. Jerusalem is the most luminous place on earth, according to physics. This part of the world, the lowest place on earth, and the most luminous. So let's see. So last time we were talking about Rabbi Ashlag's introduction to Cabbala. He talks about Rabbi Chananya ben Akashemer Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu Lezakot Yisrael Vicha Kirba Lehem Torah Mitzvot Shene'amar Adonai Chafetz Leman Tzidkol Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. Translates. Oh, you need the translation? Oh, I forgot. You don't speak Hebrew. Okay. It says in the Mishnah, Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha, the great sages of the Mishnah and the sages of Israel 2,100 years ago, he said, these words are still very much alive today. He said, the Holy One, blessed be, wanted to give Israel merit, so he increased Torah and mitzvot for them to do. As it is said in the Tanakh, God desired, God desired for the sake of his righteousness or his justice. Tzidko could be righteousness or justices. Let's say justice. God desired for the sake of his justice to increase Torah and to make it beautiful. So that explains what does it mean, like increase Torah and make it beautiful, that we have more merit. Lezakot et Yisrael. Lezakot et Yisrael. Zayin Chaf Vav Tav means to zchut. Zchut is merit. Harbe zchut. Harbe zchuyot. Rights. It could also mean rights in modern Hebrew. Zchuyot is rights, but zchut today and in the ancient language is merit. Harbe zchut. Zchut omed alav. Zchuto omed alav. His merit stands by him. Literally translated. So always put when you're making a macchinetta, put the water in first. Up to the little hole. And you put in the coffee. Pack it down a little bit. Some people, you don't have to pack it down. Anyhow, so what in the world does this mean? The Rabbi Ashlag says, don't read zchut, but rather zakut. Zakut is purity. Hizdachuyot. Purifications. Hizdachech. In modern and ancient Hebrew means to purify. Hizdachech. So, if you have boiling water, you got to be very careful to hold the bottom of the macchinetta with a cloth or something. So, how does God purify Israel? He purifies Israel. He doesn't need our mitzvot. God does not need our mitzvot. The mitzvot are given to us. And the purification he talks about is basically transforming our will to receive and our selfish motives into the will to give and to be magnanimous and think about other people, not think about ourselves so much, or even at all. So he said the interesting idea is this. I need to know the Latin. I looked up once the Latin term for something from something. Yesh mi yesh. It's in medieval Jewish philosophy, theology. a very common term. Yesh miyesh means God created something from something. Aristotle thought that everything was something from something, and I'm not sure, but I don't know about Greek philosophy so much, but I heard that he believed matter was eternal. So how do you say ex nihilo means something from nothing? God said, "Let there be light." There was light. There wasn't any light in all of existence. He said, whatever that means, and there's light. Big bang, boom, bang. So if God is all giving, there is, God forbid, a will to receive in God, because who would he receive from? He's imperfect, that he needs something. He doesn't need us. He doesn't need your stinking mitzvot. Excuse me for saying that. He doesn't need our service of God. You think. I said that stinking because, like, some people think they're so great, they're so righteous, they're so good. They clothe the naked Africans, and they feed the poor Californians, and they do mitzvot, and they put their tefillin on, and it's like, oh, I'm serving God. Ich. Ich in German and Yiddish is I. Ichsa in Hebrew is yucky. So the creation ex nihilo, something from creating something out of nothing. What did God create out of absolute nothingness? Will to receive. So that's where we left off. Now we're saying Kafi Amor Kalul Baratzon Lekabel Behekreach Techef Machshavet Abriya B'Kol Ribui Arachim Shebo B'Yachad Im Hashefa Gadol She'ashiv Lanu Tam Lanikam. So he says, Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag Zecher Tzadik Levracha says, as it is said, as we said before, included in the Kalul Haratzon Lekabel, the will to receive that creation ex nihilo was included necessarily immediately in the thought of creation. Machshavet Abriya, as God had like anthropomorphism. We can only explain the world based on our experience in life. We can't explain something based on something we have never actually experienced. So when we're talking about God, we use anthropomorphisms when we say that God, before creation, was his thoughts. Before creation, God had a thought of how to create the world, and then he speaks, and there is the world. Okay. So another ethical teaching you can learn from this for a very important behavior modification, and the secret of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings on prayer is think before you speak. Think about what you're saying before it comes out of your mouth. And when you're praying, or you think about who you're praying to and what that means, and the fear and the love before you let the word come out of your mouth. That's connecting your thought to speech. That's not what we're talking about here. The thought, God thought about creating the world, and included in that thought was that I'm going to create something from nothing, and that something is the will to receive. Because all I have is giving and goodness, God says. So, together, not just the will to receive was bound up in that great plenty that he thought to grant and grant to Israel and grant to the world to give benefit, and the secret of that's the secret of light and vessel. In Cabbala, we're talking about vessels like sfirot. Basically, the sfira is a light in a vessel, like a light bulb is analogous to a sphera, an illuminating orb. What does that mean? You have the light and you have the vessel. So we talk about it in the higher worlds, there's sphirot with light, basically vessels and light. God is all light, and somehow he takes that light and fashions it into vessels and fills it with light. So there's a coarser light and a more refined light. That's how he created the sphirot, the inside building blocks of all of reality and creation. So I'm going to check my coffee. Hold on. So, the that should be enough for the time being. So here we take very careful. Got to be very careful. It's boiling hot. So I have a pot holder here, and you need a cup. Don't be very, very important. Do not drink directly out of the macchinetta unless it has cooled down, and even then, I wouldn't advise it. It just looks gross. Don't drink out of something that other people use also. Do's and don'ts. Do be happy. So let's see. Light and vessel. Sit. Very, very hot. Espresso. And let it sit for 5-10 minutes. Okay, so back to the subject. Secret of light and vessel is what is the secret of the light and vessel? He just said, included, the will to receive is necessarily immediately included in God's thought of creation, and all the the plethora of values in God's thought of creation. What does he mean, values? Any kind of attribute or thing. The ubiquitous word, thing. Any attribute or thing is he calls arachim. Arachim in modern Hebrew is good values, like family values. Arachim mishpachtiim. So ribui arachim, all the values, love, fear, beauty, empathy, dominance, connection, sovereignty. These are all arachim, attributes, I guess you could say. And then not only the attributes, but then what are these? Every possible combination of these attributes, anything that could ever be, is in God's thought. So in general, immediately said, how are they going to receive these attributes, this plethora? As Carl Sagan of blessed memory used to say, billions and billions and billions of attributes. So he says, they have to have a will to receive. They have to want. If they have no will to receive, they're not going to take anything that I may want to give them, whether it's an emotion, an idea, an emotion, or an action, or a physical thing. So he says that's the secret of the light in the vessel. In the upper world. So light is the giving and the vessel is the receiving. Light is this, and the light in the vessel emerged from the thought of creation, we call the Ein Sof also, together with that first emergence of the light, the vessel was inside. That's he explains the Arizal. Rabbi Ashlag comes to explain concepts in the Arizal that are very hard to understand. He gives a good pshat, a simple meaning, pshat, simple meaning of how the light came out from the infinite and into the empty space and circled around and made a sphere. So I'm like, I always ask, how did he create a vessel? There's light. The Arizal says there's coarse light and there's more refined light. The light could become coarse. I don't know what coarse light is. Maybe the light that we can see in the spectrum, in terms of physics, we can only see a certain amount of light. So perhaps that's coarser light, and the more sublime light is the light that we can't see beyond the spectrum, ultraviolet and infrared, or whatever. And it keeps going on and on and on. So I don't know. But in terms of the idea of the Arizal, that Rabbi Ashlag comes and explains, it's that the light is basically, what does it mean? Light is what God gives us. It's an anthropomorphism. Again, light is, God has no light. He doesn't need light. What is God's light? We say God's light. Giving. Shining light. Illuminating. That's so So the will to receive is wrapped up together in that thought of creation, and when the first light comes out, the first act of giving in existence. Before God, when God says, I'm going to create the world, I have to give. But they have to be able to receive. So I'm all giving, so I say, let there be will to receive, and that's subsumed in all of this giving, like a germination of the will to receive. Seed. Nullified, like you put the seed in the ground, the seed is nullified to the ground, and then something grows from it. So you can't even recognize, in all of that giving and all that shefa, light, abundance, God's plenty. You can't, who's going to get the plenty? So there's this little germination of the will to receive in all of that light, and it concatenates from level to level. And the levels that descend from the light of God's countenance and distance themselves from God may be blessed. This is the measure of the concretization of the will to receive included in God's shefa. We said last time, shefa is God's plenty. It literally means, I didn't say it clearly enough, I didn't say last time, shofea means to flow. So shefa is the flow. God's flow is a funny translation. Effluent means in Britain sewage, but the word effusion. Effusion of God's plenty is shofea. So the will to receive is included in God's plenty. What's the word I just used? Effusion. If you're from California, it's flow, man. So it's possible to say the opposite. Rabbi Ashlag says, Rabbi Ashlag Zecher Tzadik Levracha says, it's possible to say the opposite. According to the measure of concretization of the will to receive God's shefa, so too it goes from level to level. Thus it descends from level to level. So how is that the opposite of what he just said? The will to receive is bound together in the will to give, and all this shefa and that concatenates from level to level, and the measure of the and b'shir shehamadregot yordot me'et or panav. According to the measure that these levels descend from God's countenance, which is an expression for God's revelation, really. The insight, like the greatest revelation one could have is God's countenance, His face, the light of His face. We don't even see the face, just the light of His face. So the measure of the concatenation from level to level, and the measure of the levels descending from the light of God's countenance, distancing themselves from Him, according to that measure, according to the measure that it descends down through the levels from the infinite down to the finite in us, so too, I think it's the intensity of the flow as it goes down, the more the will to receive becomes concrete, included in that shefa. So in other words, up, high, up, whatever high, we discussed what high and low means, because God has no high, no low, no up, no down, no near, no far. It's another discussion we'll get into. So, Li Neder, Bezrat Hashem. So the lower you go down, the more concrete the will to receive is, and you can also say the opposite. Converse. According to the level of the concretization of the will to receive, so too does it draw more and more of God's sublime light, sublime shefa and light. Shefa and light are similar. Shefa is plenty, light is or, but they're both expressions of what God gives, variation of meaning. Shefa is more the concretization of what God gives. Light is a more sublime aspect of giving, more internal. Again, internal, external, that's God there's no spirituality, and with God there's no internal, external. No up, no down. Keep that in mind for next time. And then it goes all the way down to the very lowest of levels, that is to say that the will to receive becomes concrete there in the lower levels as much as it should. And that's called the world of Asiya, the world of action. So there are different worlds. There's the physical cosmos, universe, that's called the world of action, where the physical laws of physics apply, that we perceive with our bodies and our senses. That's called the world of action, the universe. And there's the worlds beyond worlds and worlds within worlds. So beyond the infinite, then you have a system of worlds down to the world of Asiya, the world of action, literally making. And the will to receive is explained by a parable of the human body. We compare it to the human body. So the will to receive is like the body, and the shefa that the body receives is called the attribute of the Nivchan lemidat tochenu shel hachayim shebagufahu. V'shefa shemakabel nivchan, and the shefa that is received, it's distinguished as considered. Okay, the shefa that the body receives is considered the measure that we have within us of the life in the body. So basically it's saying that the will to receive, the shefa is like our life force. It's our life. And the more we desire life, the more life we draw. The less we desire life, the less life we draw. Somebody completely doesn't want to live, he may walk around and talk, but he may move his body, but he's for all intents and purposes. Sorry, for all intensive purposes. No, all intents and purposes, intensively speaking, is that's how much he's going to live. So the more you want, the more you get. That's the idea. Oh, I want a lot of money. I don't get my money. Okay, so maybe I'm going about it the wrong way. The more, you could say, the more you desire something, the more you get. Some people, they desire something very, very strongly. They don't get it. So I don't understand how that what he says can be true. How can this, my question, Rabbi Ashlag, I ask you a question. That the will to receive is the aspect of the body of a person, and the shefa that the body receives is according to it's called the life in the body, and therefore also too with all other creations in the world. In the way, Mehopi explains, in this way that all of the distinctions between the upper worlds and this world is what? That all the while that the will to receive is included in God's shefa, may he be blessed, it's not concretized in its final form, and it's all that while it's considered still in the spiritual worlds, above this world, beyond this world. After the will to receive concretizes in its final form, then it's considered as already in this world. So that's something to think about. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya bidvaro. good espresso. We do, in the Carlebach tradition, we start with the song and we end with the song. Chadesh Sasoni El Na Ve'avi Chadesh Sasoni El Na